If you're into creepy true stories, unsettling real experiences, and the kind of moments people can't quite explain, you're in the right place. I upload new stories 3, 4, sometimes even 5 times a week. If that sounds like your thing, consider subscribing. And it all starts with that moment.
It was Tuesday, early October. I parked at a gravel pull-off on the mountain shoulder, western North Carolina, the Blue Ridge side. Not a trail anyone writes about. I remember there were 2 vehicles already there when I pulled in. Gray SUV, clean, recent model, and an older red pickup with a sticker across the rear window I couldn't read, no matter how long I squinted. I remember standing there with my pack half on, just staring at that sticker for a moment, trying to make out what it said, and giving up. I still see that truck. I don't know why that detail stuck when other things didn't. I'd done that stretch few times before. It's a local trail. You hike it because you know it, not because anyone pointed you there. Lower section follows a creek through thick rhododendron. The water's loud enough down there that it swallows most other sound. I like that section. It lets your head empty out. I was thinking about something from work, some meeting that hadn't gone the way I wanted. Nothing important. Just the kind of mental noise that takes a few miles to burn off. My legs were doing what they always do, and I wasn't paying much attention to anything in particular, and I almost stepped on the ring. Something caught light in the mud, and I thought foil, trash, some bit of wrapper pressed into the red clay, and my boot nudged it and it rolled, and I looked down. Wedding band, plain gold, no stones. I picked it up. The underside was worn smooth in the way that takes years, not polished smooth, worn smooth, the difference between something finished and something lived in. There was mud packed inside the band. It was warm from the sun, which I registered as strange before I could explain why. I stood there longer than made sense. I looked down the trail, looked back the way I'd come. Nothing either direction. I almost pocketed it automatically, like finding a coin. I had the impulse. I remember that clearly. I was already reaching, and then I stopped and set it on a flat rock just off the trail where someone retracing their steps would see it. I told myself fingers shrink in cold weather, rings slip. Whoever lost it will look for it, so I hope they find it. The trail climbs out of the creek section and opens up along a south-facing slope. Good views when the leaves are off, which they mostly were. I was moving well, better than the lower section, and I'd stopped thinking about the ring. Or I'd put it somewhere I wasn't looking at it. That's different from forgetting. I know the difference now. About a mile further, I stepped past something in the leaves and stopped. I stepped back. Watch. Face down, half buried in leaf litter, just off the right edge of the trail. I crouched and picked it up. It was heavy, the way you know immediately it's not cheap, a heavy and solid, with real movement inside it. It was the first time I was holding something like this in my hand. The bracelet had snapped, not unclasped. The pin had been pulled clean out of the link. The metal around the hole wasn't bent or deformed. It had just given way under very heavy force. I turned it over. The crystal wasn't scratched, not even a scuff. I sat with that for a moment. If this had come off in a fall, if someone had gone down on the trail and hit rock with their wrist, the crystal would have taken damage. That's just how it works. The crystal was clean, so it hadn't hit rock. I turned around slowly, a full circle, holding the watch. Nothing moved. The woods looked the same in every direction. I stood there, and I could feel the weight of it in my hand, and I didn't know what to do with it, so I slid it into my jacket pocket. That felt stupid, even as I did it. Leaving it there felt worse. I started walking again. My pace was different after that. I didn't decide to speed up. I was just moving faster, scanning the trees on both sides without knowing what I was looking for. Movement, maybe. Someone searching. I kept telling myself that. Someone out here looking for a lost watch, a lost ring. That made me uneasy, but I haven't seen anyone yet. I kept walking. I don't know exactly when the quiet started. Somewhere in that next mile, the background layer, birds adjusting as you pass through, small things moving in the leaves, the general alive texture of a working forest. That layer had thinned out. It happens gradually enough that you don't catch the moment it starts. You just notice at some point that it's already gone. It's a weird feeling when forest goes quiet. I stopped walking. Just stopped, mid-stride, and stood there on the trail and waited. All. Didn't shift, didn't ease, it just all. Didn't shift, didn't ease, it just sat there, even and complete, like it had been in place a long time before I walked into it. I looked at the trees to my left, then my right. There was nothing to see, just trunks and shadow and stillness. I started walking again. My footsteps sounded too loud. The sound of them seemed to go out and come back, which doesn't make sense, but that's how it felt. Like the forest was reflecting the noise back at me instead of absorbing it, like there wasn't enough other sound to swallow it. I adjusted my pack strap, I moved faster, and told myself I'm imagining things. The trail drops into a wide hollow about 1.5 miles from the lot. Big tulip poplars down there, deep bark, cold air pooled in the low ground. It always feels older than the rest of the trail, quieter in a different way, the way old places are quiet. I've always liked it. I smelled wood smoke coming down the slope. Wood smoke meant campers. Campers meant people. I felt something loosen in my chest that I hadn't named as tight until it loosened. Someone had set up in the hollow, dropped a ring on the way in, lost a watch scrambling around camp. That's all this was. I stepped off trail toward the smell and pushed through the brush, and the clearing opened up between the poplars. And I stopped. 4 tents arranged in a loose arc around a stone fire ring. Good tents, not cheap gear, not beginners. Properly staked, guy lines neat and even, the kind of setup that takes practice to get right. Lantern hanging between 2 trees on a paracord line, doing that slow, dying blink. On, off, on, pause, off. 2 camp chairs on their sides near the fire ring. At a first glance looked really good, but the longer I looked, the more things didn't make sense. Folding table with a full cook set on it. Pot on a small backpacking stove, lid slightly ajar. A mug near the edge of the table with a thin skin of cold coffee across the top, the kind that forms after an hour, maybe more, when the heat has been gone long enough. 1 boot near the fire ring, upright, laces tied. I stood at the edge of the clearing, and I didn't go in yet. I stood there, and I looked at all of it, and I tried to find the explanation that fit. It didn't look abandoned. Abandoned looks different. Things spread out over time. A gradual entropy, leaves settling onto surfaces, that slow accumulation of time passing. This looked paused. The word that kept coming back to me was paused, like a photograph taken mid-sentence, everything in the frame in the middle of something. I stepped into the clearing. The air inside felt different from the woods outside it. Stiller. It made me aware of my own breathing. I moved slowly. I was looking at everything, taking inventory without meaning to. Headlamps on the ground, not in a pile, not together. 1 near the entrance of the nearest tent, 1 by the fire ring, maybe 6 feet from the chairs, another 1 closer to the table. All of them separated from the bags they should have been packed in, each one somewhere different, as if every person in this camp had set theirs down in the middle of reaching for it and hadn't picked it back up. I looked at the chairs. They were on their sides, but they were still inside their own footprint, the way chairs fall when someone stands from them fast, tipped backward, still in position, not kicked or thrown. I moved toward the nearest tent. It had a vertical cut down the side panel, long, starting near the top and running almost to the ground sheet, straight. The fabric had curled slightly outward along the slice, that specific curl that happens when something is cut rather than torn. Torn fabric pulls and frays, cut fabric curls clean. I crouched and touched the edge with 1 finger and ran it along the length. Smooth. 1 pass. Whatever made it was sharp, and whoever made it was unhurried. I stood up slowly. The tent next to it was zip shut. I looked at it for a moment without understanding why it bothered me. And then I did understand. The zipper pull was lying flat against the exterior flap, pressed down against it. The position it's in when the zip is fully closed from outside. I've camped enough to know this without thinking about it. You cannot zip a tent to that position from the inside. The geometry doesn't allow it. The pull ends up at the wrong place. Someone standing outside this tent, standing roughly where I was standing now, had closed it. I looked at it, and I didn't move. There was a phone near the table, face down in the dirt. I picked it up. Screen black, dead battery, 1 clean diagonal crack across the glass. I held it for a moment. I don't know what I was waiting for.
I set it back down in the same spot, carefully, in the dirt impression it had made, which I didn't understand why I did. I was standing between two tents when the far one moved, not violently. The fabric pressed slowly outward from the inside, the shape of something leaning against a surface, the tent wall deforming outward in a concentrated area, and then slowly easing back. It lasted maybe 3 seconds, then the fabric went smooth. I stopped breathing. 1 beat passed. A buckle tapped against a pole from inside. Small sound, clean. Once, then nothing. The tent was still. I was counting seconds without knowing I was counting. I got to somewhere around 8, maybe 10, and then, from the tree line behind me, not close, not far, something put weight onto a branch. 1 crack. Nothing after it. No rustling, no follow-up movement, no scatter of something startled. Just that one sound, and then silence, and the silence afterward felt different from the silence before. Denser, and every part of my body was awake in a way that had nothing to do with deciding to be awake. I took a step back, then another. I walked out of the clearing like I was trying not to look like I was leaving. Some part of me was holding on to the idea that running changes things, the sound profile, what it signals to anything listening, and I kept that idea in front of me like it was the only solid thing. I walked fast through the gap in the trees, and the moment the trail was under my feet, I ran. My lungs went ragged, fast, vision narrowed at the edges. I was on a downhill grade, on a trail I knew, and I was still afraid of putting a foot wrong, so I was watching the ground in front of me and running and trying to breathe at the same time. About a minute in, movement in the trees to my left, somewhat parallel, not crashing through brush, not the bounding irregularity of a startled deer hitting undergrowth. Trying to keep pace through the slope, it kept pace. I told myself deer. Deer will parallel you sometimes, drawn by sound, moving along a slope above the trail. That's a real thing that happens. I told myself that, clearly and specifically. I didn't look. I made a decision not to look, and I kept it, because I understood, some cold and very clear part of me understood, that seeing something concrete would collapse a particular uncertainty I was relying on to keep my legs moving. As long as I didn't know, I could keep running. If I knew, I wasn't sure I could. I ran. The slope evened out. The hollow gave way to the ridge, and the ridge to the upper creek section, and my breathing was so loud it was filling my whole skull, and somewhere in that last half mile, I stopped hearing the movement in the trees. I don't know exactly when. I was focused on my feet, on the trail, on the sound of the footbridge ahead of me, and then I hit it hard, and it bounced under my weight, and I kept running, and I didn't stop until the gravel of the lot was under my feet. Both vehicles were still there. The gray SUV, the red pickup with the sticker I still couldn't read. I stood in the lot, and I looked at them, and I felt my stomach drop in a way that was separate from the running, a different kind of weight. If the people from that camp had left, if they'd packed up and gone, they hadn't gone by car. There were 2 cars in this lot, and mine was one of them. I got into my vehicle, locked the doors, sat with my hands on the steering wheel and watched the tree line at the edge of the lot, and nothing came out of it. My hands were shaking badly enough that I missed the ignition the first time. I got signal about 20 minutes out and pulled onto the shoulder and called. Gave them the coordinates as best I could, described the tents, the cut panel, the zipper. The woman on the line took it down and said someone would go out and take a look and that I'd hear back if they needed anything further from me. I never heard back. I called once more about 2 weeks later. The man I reached said he'd look into it and take my number. He didn't call back either. I don't know what they found. I don't know if they found anything. I've looked for news from that area, that time frame, and nothing ever came up that matched. No reports, no missing persons announcement I could connect to it. Nothing. That absence bothered me almost as much as the rest of it. Somewhere on the mountain road, on one of those long, blind curves, I felt the weight in my jacket pocket, and I started thinking about the spacing. The ring was 2 miles from the camp. The watch was 1 mile from the camp, both on the same trail, both sitting on the line between the clearing and the parking lot, on a path leading away from the tents, moving toward the road. Mile 2, mile 1. That's not how you lose a ring on a hike. Rings don't slip off in the rhododendron on the way in, and then you don't notice until you're back at the car. And the watch, the pin pulled clean, the crystal unscratched. That's not a fall. That's not a snag on a branch. The tent cut from outside, zipped shut from outside. objects placed or left or dropped at interval on a trail leading away from camp toward the only road out. I've turned it over a lot since then. A long time since then, actually. I keep trying to find the arrangement of it that makes sense as something else, some version where all of it fits together into something with a mundane explanation at the center. Sometimes I almost get there. Then I feel the snapped bracelet pin under my thumb, and I think about the crystal. Clean, unscratched. The face of a watch that never hit the ground on its own. And I don't get there anymore. I still have the watch. I've never turned it in. I don't know why. I think I keep it because it's the one thing I can hold that confirms I was actually there, that I actually saw what I saw, that I didn't construct it somehow in the years since. I have not been back to that trail. And I don't hike alone anymore. If this story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There's always another one coming.